Okay, so welcome everybody. Today, Region 5 is hosting the Academy for Creative Media. It's a new opportunity for our kids. It goes into movies, it goes into sound, it goes into animation and other products. When we went to visit the West Oahu College where the creative media campuses at, we saw some exciting things. Like they had Disney had partner up with them, and they converted Moana into they overlaid Hawaiian over the Moana movie, so they can use that as an educational tool for kids with Hawaiian language, and that was really good. Uh, Today we have three extinguished guests. The three are, our moderator will be Ken Inouye. He's the assistant to the Vice Chancellor of Administration, West Oahu, West Oahu. We have our presentator, Chris Lee, Director of Academy for Creative Media, Systems. And we also have special guest Doris Ching, the Emirata for Student Affairs, University of Hawaii System. I'll turn it over to Ken right now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Steve. I think that what we're going to do here is we're going to start off with a video presentation that that Chris and some of the team over at Academy for Creative Media put together, because that'll help frame what we're going to be talking about during the course of the evening quite nicely, I believe. So, Chris, why don't you introduce what we're about to see and take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Mahalo, everybody, for inviting Doris and myself and Ken for this presentation. Behind me, you see an image of the exterior of our new building. We completed it basically last fall, but unfortunately, because of COVID, we haven't been able to let the students in, but that is going to change this fall when everybody comes back vaccinated. We're very much looking forward to having them there. So we have been giving a few small tours, and I do see a few friends on this, like Jeanette and Billy and Candy Suiso, who have been out to visit the facility. And thank you so much for coming to see us. So what we've done is we put together a short virtual tour, which I will narrate, and then will be available for questions and answers that anybody has about the program, about the building, about why we think this is really succeeding in transforming and diversifying Hawaii's economy. So I guess, Lynn, you're going to start the video, and I will try to catch up as I talk along with it. So this is the building. It's a total of about 33,000 square feet. It was designed by Gensler, which is one of the largest national firms. Locally, we work with Next Design, and there was a lot of sub-vendors and specialists in different areas for the building. We start with, which is literally our loading dock, which goes into our production corridor. The building is sort of production, post-production, and playback, as I like to put it. And we start here in the equipment cage, which is very important. One of the things that Doris and I did with a bunch of folks from and planners was to go to visit USC and Chapman University, the YouTube space in Los Angeles, and Emerson University in LA to see what their facilities were like and how they were using them. This is our sound stage. It's about 3,000 square feet. It's a multi-purpose stage in that it has a green screen that goes all the way around. You can see these giant, massive doors that are literally called elephant doors from the days of silent films and when they let elephants into the stages. There's the green screens that go all the way around. We have a unique lighting system. These pontoon lights come down to the students because in Hollywood, people work on catwalks. And of course, we don't want students up working on catwalks. So this lighting comes all the way down so that students can adjust the lighting. Right across the way from the soundstage is our two maker spaces. So students can build their sets. They can build other things that they're doing in their curriculum. And we have a second room that is just for 3D printers and laser cutters. And there's some blue machinery in the back of each of them that are particulate removal system, so it's all OSHA compliant. The power comes from above because that's a lot easier to access from there. This is the smaller of the two rooms. This is the 3D printer room. You'll also notice as you go through the building, there's lots of digital signage, which we will use to show off student work and schedules. Here we have a small hair and makeup room, also just across from the sound stage, so that everyone looks just right before they go before the cameras. We have just 3 chairs in there. But this sort of completes our production wing, and it's leads into our lobby, which is named for Roy and Hilda Takayama, who were our earliest benefactors and continue to be wonderful supporters of the program. They gave over $1 million towards this building. That's a giant LED wall. This area is really a screening room in some ways. It's where we will bring prospective students to sit and watch short films about the program and the campus. But also when we do esports, this will be our esports stadium. Underneath the risers, we've tucked a little grab and go coffee stand that will feature Starbucks products. It is actually run by the bookstore, but Gensler actually designs all the Starbucks stores. So it has all the exact same outfittings as a Starbucks would have. You can see we have a very kind of Google fresh professional feel to the building. Lots of glazing where appropriate to let in natural light, which helps with our LEED certification, and outdoor seating as well. Also, you might notice that there are little AC plugs and USB plugs everywhere because the students have to use so much equipment. They're always having to recharge their machinery. Even outside, this is an outdoor lanai that we have. It's covered with lucite. You can see this kind of has that kind of a fun Google feel. We sometimes refer to the kids as the Skittles generation because they like colors so much. So we injected some color into this otherwise sort of monochromatic building. In the distance actually is the train station, the West Oahu Park and Ride is there. But this, if you'll notice, even out here, we have very robust exterior Wi-Fi as well as power for the students, again, to plug in. And then as we come back into the lobby area, it connects to our theater, and it's the first real movie theater at any UH campus. It has 100 seats, but it is also a Dolby Atmos mixing stage, which means that you could do a Marvel movie and you could mix all of the sound effects and dialogue and music on this big Avid S6 panel there. Again, each of the chairs has its own power plug and USB, but it's also a presentation area. We actually have a camera in there. So if you're at that podium, you can do your TED Talks, you can do your Zooms from there. Here you can see the Dolby Atmos mixing panel. It's this is the only Dolby Atmos stage in Hawaii. And again, this is industry standard, so you would find this on any of the big mainland schools. Here we actually have emerging media, and I was mentioning about Noah Thompson. This is, if any of you are going to the Van Gogh thing that's coming to the convention center next month, we actually got this done first. This software and hardware was all designed by students. And this is a virtual Hawaiian forest that actually, the interactive touchscreen teaches the Hawaiian language and allows you to create endless flora and fauna and then add it into the forest environment. So it's really sort of where storytelling is going. That's why we call this Emerging Media Create X. This center is done in collaboration with UH Manoa's Lava Lab and Professor Jason Lee. This is the Hiko table. This shows the choices that we will have to make when you touch on the touch screen. And then you see, you put these filters on this 3-dimensional representation of Oahu. We also have Maui and the Big Island and Molokai. And basically the students took 4,000 pages of data and show you the different places where we can either put food or we can put wind or we can put solar energy, but they tend to compete with one another. This is another example of what we do in this production area. That's Kauai in the background. And as I mentioning, we are working with the Polynesian Voyaging Society, and we will be creating a virtual version of the Hokulea. So you'll be able to step into this room and sail like the Hokulea does. In here is our esports arena. Someone mentioned esports. We did the original 12 machines on the Manoa campus, and they are now competing nationally and globally. We actually have 24 stations here. These are the special gamer chairs. They're very comfortable, and they're also rated for 400 pounds. But this is also a Twitch platform where students will be able to broadcast the kids as they do their esports tournaments, and then when they're watching, the fans can watch in the lobby that you just saw. Here we are in post-production. We have 4 of these edit bays. Students can edit in basically any format they want, from Avid to Premiere. This is the Foley stage, and this is how you make sound effects and footsteps and all the noises that actually go into the post-production of a project that are not recorded live. And then you record it as you watch the images go by on that screen. And what you have is a recording studio in here, or a recording panel in here, and we have a camera over the mixing panel so that the students who are all sitting behind the instructor can see what the student is doing. In this panel, also an Avid S6, sits between the Foley stage for sound effects, and on the other side, you have the audio side, which you often know as looping, or we call automatic dialogue replacement, where you have to, when you have to change people's dialogue because it was too windy and you couldn't hear what they were saying. So this can also be used independently. Here we have another Dolby Atmos mixing studio. This one is a smaller teaching environment, has the same camera over it, but you can see this building was built to spec. It's an octagon. And when you're in these environments, the acoustics are completely pristine. We had a whole secondary acoustics team whose only job was to go through the process and make sure that nothing was going to rattle or make noises, or and make sure everything was getting put in set right. So it's great when you're able to do a purpose-built facility like this one. And you can see the speakers all around you. The Dolby Atmos is famous. If you go to the movie theaters at the Ward or the Regal, you're experiencing Dolby Atmos, but you're also experiencing it in your home, even if you don't have the equipment to play it back. This is the digital color correction suite. This is called a DaVinci Resolve. Just like we change the audio on projects, you also can change the skin tones and the backgrounds and the palettes and the production design. So that's part of the process of post-production. So as I mentioned, we sort of have playback, we have production, and we have post-production. This is the Instagram spot at the top of the risers. It's quite popular. We really wanted a place that students would want to collaborate and stay at all times. And on the second floor also, we have the Writers' Room, which is named for Hawaii European Cinema, the film festival, which gave us a nice gift and had a naming opportunity there. We've also had some nice gifts from my Iolani classmate, Paul Casasa, and the ABC stores. But this is, writing on TV shows and movies is often done with a lot of people in a room like this. The classrooms, we have multiple flex classrooms, which means that everything is modular, everything can move. Generally, one side we have the desktops, and on the other side we have just the individual chairs where people have their laptops, and even all the televisions, all the flat screens are on movable stands, so we can put them wherever we need to without the building. The building, as much as possible, is future-proof and nimble, and nothing is sort of static about it. And that's really because technology changes so quickly. And even in the process of this, which we got a planning grant first, and then it was what they call design build. And I'm very proud that this was actually accomplished on time and on budget in about 24 months. But it is always going to be organic, and it will always be changing. So there's very little that is stationary. And this is one of the things that we learned going to visit Chapman and going to visit USC and talking to the end users there, and how students actually interact with a facility like this. Again, everything you see is both industry standard and as good as anything you will find at USC or UCLA. Down at the end, something that I think is something new. It's an incubator space for student-run companies. We really encourage the entrepreneurial students to start their companies with us. And this is basically a WeWork co-working space. I had the designers all go look at some of the accelerators around town, but essentially it's, you give them data ports and the ability to interact in like I said, a very professional feeling space, and really get them, so when you have these students that are creating their original software or working on their projects, this is a place where they can start those companies. And outside, we have Hawaii's first outdoor movie theater, which is something we planned before COVID, but this is a weatherproof LED wall, kind of similar to what you would find in Shibuya or Times Square, except it has a much better sound system. And then facing it, we have a large raked amphitheater that accommodates technically about 300 people. So that's the overview of the building. And we had planned to have a big grand opening last January, but COVID got in the way. But hopefully sometime this fall, we'll be able to invite everybody out to come and see it for themselves.
Well, thank you, Chris, for that overview of our new facility at UH West Oahu. I think the first question I'm going to pose to you here is one that I get asked on a fairly regular basis once folks hear about the creative media program and such, especially has become very relevant in this time that we're living now due to COVID, which is how do the goals and curriculum of this program and the facility that you have just discussed, how can these all have an impact potentially on diversifying our state's economy? Because diversification of the economy has become a big hot topic once COVID hit and tourism took a big hit. How can what we're doing here play a role?
Well, I've been at this since about 2002, 2003. And if you look at my foundational documents and presentation to the Board of Regents back then, I think Pat Lee was the chair back then. It was all about jobs. It was all about diversifying the economy. It was all about keeping our kids here. It wasn't necessarily about we don't have a film school and everybody else does and we should have one. It was a very different approach. I didn't realize quite how different it was when I proposed it, but fortunately the Board of Regents supported it. But I went out and looked at every campus, and I met with students, I met with faculty, I met with Senate faculties, I met with admin. I looked at what kind of facilities were around. I also talked to the legislators at the time, the governor at the time. I talked to the industry itself, and I talked to Bishop Street. So I really looked at all these different constituencies about how we might do this, because if you think about what Hawaii can participate in the global economy, tourism is our bread and butter, and nothing is ever going to change about that. So I think where we succeed is when we find things that align with that economy. That we have the ability to create content, and we are a place that people like to work on their content. And one of the things that very first things I did, and I don't know if Candy's still on, but I went out to visit Candy and the Sea Riders when they were in their Olelo facility. I still have a very treasured picture of some of those students from back in the day. And when I would go out and sort of do I sort of call it my fam tour or my fundraising tour for what I was proposing, I used to show their shorts, their PSAs that they were doing, and I wouldn't say who made it at first. And then I would let everybody know that these short films, which were winning awards, not just locally and not just nationally, but internationally, were really becoming the gold standard for student media production. We're coming from Waianae High School, which was generally, seen as and is in a very at-risk community, and would show up in that what I consider loathsome annual Honolulu. I hope nobody's sorry from Honolulu Magazine ranking of the public schools, and always be basically at the bottom. And I said, these are our most precious students, and they are as talented as anybody else. What you have to give them is the opportunity. You have to give them the facilities. You have to give them something to aspire to. And as Candy will tell you, and as I witnessed myself, her kids, they didn't want to leave their facility where they were working. They had to scoot them out of the Olelo facility, make them go home. But even then, they would carry their laptops home and continue working on their projects. So that has always been sort of my North Star in all of this, is my true belief that the talent is here. The technology is available, and what we have to do is basically connect those pieces. Now, I'm really proud, because I've been such a champion for the film and television industry, to say that we're probably going to have a record year coming out of COVID in the film and television business, because we were responsible with our numbers, and we found innovative ways to utilize underappreciated assets. We actually did. I did an editorial last February saying that we should have production bubbles in some of our closed down resorts. And in fact, on Maui, They shot at both the Andaz and the Four Seasons hotels. And because the industry is a union business, they have very, very strong protocols, the strongest protocols in any industry. They're about 80 pages long, and they're designed to keep everybody safe. So when you're on a show like Magnum or the new Doogie Kamealoha or the upcoming NCIS Hawaii, you get tested 3 times a week. You work in zones. You don't get to interact with the main talent unless there's a real reason to be there. But you get tested all the time. And I think none of the shows have had any COVID issues. And that was a question mark because people were coming from outside our community. But it was done in a very safe manner. And now here we are, several hundred million. I don't know what the final total will be, but 2018, we did $480 million in direct spend, which if you think about it with the multiplier is probably about $1 billion of economic activity. Our goal is to see this rise to $1 billion a year in production. And what has happened at the same time that we've been building this program, and I started at Manoa, but now we support programs on all 10 campuses, is that all of you who watch Disney Plus or Netflix or Warner Media, which is now called Discovery Warner or something, they're all spending enormous sums of money creating new content. So there's no question that Hawaii should and can get a bigger part of that pie. And what we're doing in that area is providing the workforce for it. But beyond that, it's important to understand that technology and creative media touches our lives in every way. And so, the Manoa program really is the flagship in terms of being the film school. And the faculty there and the curriculum is largely based on USC and American Film Institute. And they have turned out hundreds of award-winning kids. We had our first graduate debut a feature at the Sundance Film Festival this year, which is the preeminent American film festival, and a huge positive mark for us. And we really do sort of have developed a Hawaiian sense of cinema in over the last 20 years, and virtually all of them have come out of our school. The West Oahu program started in 2013 or so when Doris, were you the interim then, or was that Rockney still there? I can't remember. But that program has responded to all of the changes in creative media that have taken place since we started the first program. So if you think back to when I first proposed the program at Manoa, I wanted to use Friendster as a way to connect the kids online, but that was the only thing that was out there. There was no YouTube. Most importantly, there were no smartphones. There was no Instagram. There was no social media in general, and there were no applications for smartphones. So this campus turns out a lot of social media directors. The kids often deliver in TikToks, not in short films. And we really call it the transmedia school because of that. But it is my fervent hope that both programs will be able to utilize the equipment and the facilities and the technology at this campus, because we're not really going to build more than one of these. And so I was just thrilled that we could get this one done. So, that's really how what we do is really think about how do we expand our economy in a way that keeps our students here with living wage jobs. And I'm really, really proud of, if you look at the numbers, you look at the jobs the kids are getting, kids coming out of this program at West Oahu are working at BMW. They're the digital director for Target. They are the social media director for the Kroc Center. They doing the same for the city and county of Honolulu. They've created original smartphone applications for Washington Place. So they have a wonderful track record, not just of matriculating students and graduating them, but finding them good jobs. And also at this program at West Oahu, we have a very successful early college program, which involves Waianae High School, Waipahu, Kapolei, and Campbell. And so we have a huge pipeline of students coming from those schools, and we hope to be able to expand that. And all this has been done by Charla Hanaoka, who unfortunately could not join us tonight, who has developed the program out there. And of course, Minette Benham is the chancellor of the campus now. So, that's really how I think we're striving to make a difference. We're not done yet, working on getting an actual studio complex built with private money, not state money. But that's the sort of the next level of this that hopefully will get done, and I think will be a real game changer.
Well, thank you for that background there, Chris. Now, speaking of background, and working to try to blend several questions that have come up in the chat into one. One of the things that you reference is your goal of trying to keep kids in Hawaii, and do that by having them have good, interesting, sustainable, well-paying opportunities, and this being one of the ways to do it. One thing that I think that this would be a good opportunity for you to talk about your background, the fact that you do definitely know what you're talking about, in the sense that you grew up here and you went to Hollywood, worked in Hollywood, and then came back here. So hence you know what it's like on both sides. So you're able to comment on what it takes to make it out there and make it in this industry. So if you could go into a little bit about your journey to Hollywood and back, and why you feel that the kids in Hawaii are every bit as good as the rest of the country and the world, and what we are all doing to try to get them to take part in the program, out of high school.
Well, so everybody loves to talk about brain drain, and I try to look at it a different way. And in that I always ask, because you hear like, oh, this person's doing this person's doing that. I don't know of anybody who comes from here who doesn't do well on the mainland. And the reason is that there's just more opportunity on the mainland than they might have had here in Hawaii. But again, I think when you talk about economic diversification in this state, it's really an issue of what are we going to be able to do here with our geographic isolation, and what are we prevented from doing here. So when you look at all of the efforts that all the different states compete, whether it's for a Boeing plant or a BMW plant, or Amazon headquarters, or we're getting an Amazon distribution center, all of them are things that require an unfinished good to be shipped to Hawaii, and a finished good to be shipped out. And my philosophy about this is broadband connects us in ways that ships and planes cannot. And that what we have to do is, assume this role in the creation and execution of content. And this goes for other products too, by the way. I'm a huge fan of what Melly James and the Mana Up group does in terms of jumpstarting local companies that are creating, whether it's food or clothing or candies or things that are about of Hawaii, and are most importantly are owned by folks in Hawaii. We often like to talk about how Olukai is actually not from Hawaii at all, but it's a huge brand. And we have seen this sort of cultural appropriation take place in a lot of industries. And so, while we may not be able to manufacture things here, we can invent the intellectual property here. And that is really the focus of the school and everything that we do. I wonder if Doris might talk a little bit about her experiences, and also give some perspective and context to what we've been able to do with this program over the last almost 20 years now, actually.
Well, sure. My background is not creative media. My background is strictly higher education, teacher education, and student affairs. I mean, my positions have been Associate Dean of Education, Vice President for Student Affairs, and after retiring for 10 years, I got pulled back into UH West Oahu as the interim vice chancellor for academic affairs. And then when Rockney retired, David Lasner talked me into becoming the interim chancellor. And that's where I got involved with creative media. So my background is education. And I think my experience is that we've been able to put together an articulated program among the 10 campuses of the university. And we're the only system-wide program. Now, this is actually Chris's vision, but I simply helped him implement it along with people like Charlotte Hanaoka and all of the community colleges. I'll just keep it brief that way, Chris, because I think there are some other questions. One particular question, and I see that actually it's appeared more than once, is that how we're recruiting local talent and how we're working with the high schools. So I think you can comment on that on all islands, because that is a very, very important part of the program.
Yeah, if you have kids or your siblings have kids and your uncle or auntie or whatever, you know that kids today are basically kind of born digital. They're somewhat digitally literate, but that doesn't mean they know necessarily how to harness that technology. And that's really kind of what we have to offer. But it's also has to be noted that you can't get a job today, or you can't get a good job, let me put it a different way. You can't get a good job if you don't have these technological skills. And, more and more, if you're applying for something and you're a student coming out of one of these programs and you have the ability to be the in-house videographer, create a smartphone app for phones, for the product, all of marketing has become basically virtual. The demographics, the younger demographics are not watching television. And if they are watching television, they're watching on their smartphones and stuff, but they are consuming things, but it's coming to them in different ways. And so that's really sort of what we're generating internally in terms of the whole social media sphere of things. And as I mentioned, because we do have very specific early college programs with those 4 schools. And I know that we hope to expand it. Those are funded by special GIA grants, I believe. And this year in COVID, I think all the GIAs went away. So Candy can probably speak to whether or not she thinks they're going to come back, or the funding for them will come back. But what happens in those programs is the kids are getting college credit while they're in high school. And, we have kids who, when they enter, they're basically sophomores already. So, and again, it's like they sort of can't get enough of this technology and stuff. And it's amazing what they are capable of doing. I can go through some of the questions if you'd like. Someone asked if West Oahu is on par with USC. So, USC, NYU, AFI always vie for the top 3 spots. There's the Hollywood Trades do an annual top 25 or top 50 film schools, and I'm determined to be in there. I will say that we have facilities that are as good as any of those schools now. And we have some things that those schools don't have, which is like our emerging media lab and what we're doing in virtual reality and augmented reality and projection technology and data visualization. And I'm very proud of that. So it's going to be a little bit of catch up, but now it's a much more even playing field. One thing that we haven't been able to offer in the past is what we call a terminal degree. So a Bachelor of Fine Arts or a Master of Fine Arts. And we've had a lot of great kids go to Chapman or go to AFI or go to Loyola Marymount for their graduate degrees. And it takes time to do this, but I'm hopeful that with these facilities, Manoa will be able to offer those terminal degrees at the West Oahu campus. West Oahu does not offer terminal degrees itself, but there are other programs within the UH system where the degree granting institution is not necessarily where something is taught. So I hope to see that sort of collaboration in the future. And I absolutely expect us to be in that top 25 list not too long from now. I will also say that as we launch in the fall, I'm very proud when everybody's talking about diversity and inclusion, that this is the first majority Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander school in the world. The West Oahu campus is, I think, just this program alone is 28% Native Hawaiian. The second largest group is Filipino, and then there's various groups after that. But just in that way, the school distinguishes itself. And someone asked me, what was the film? The film was by Chris Yogi, who's one of our earliest students. Constance Wu, who was in Crazy Rich Asians and FOB, starred in it. It was shot here on the North Shore. Most of the crew actually were our students or our graduates. It was a very low budget picture, but it was a beautiful movie about Chris's reminiscence about things about his father and stuff. Very personal film. more experimental than a traditional narrative. But Chris was noted by the New Yorker magazine as one of the top 10 filmmakers for Richard Brody, who's their chief film critic. So he's a gem, and there are many more to come. So I don't know where it's playing right now, but you should look for it. Someone asked about our background, and Doris, I think you talked a little bit. For myself, Ken mentioned I went to Hollywood. I'm a Iolani grad. I left. Let's see, I'm 75. Mufi is 74. Doc Mugiishi is 76. And I went to the mainland. I went to Yale. And when I graduated, I didn't know what I was going to go in entertainment, but I didn't know how, and it doesn't recruit. So I ended up getting my first job at Good Morning America in New York City. And from there, I moved to San Francisco to work in independent film. And then I moved to Hollywood, and I started as what's called a script reader, which is basically you read a script in like one day and you write up a report on it about what it's about and whether you think it should be a movie or not. And that was at TriStar Pictures. And then I was able to work up from there, eventually becoming president of production and also president of production of Columbia and TriStar when the two companies were merged. And then I've also been a producer. So, but I came home. I actually been asked by a few UH regimes to start a film school for the university. And it wasn't something that I seriously contemplated until I made a decision to come home and base out of here and be with my family. So that's what kind of got me started. And as Doris mentioned, we now support programs on all 10 campuses. We were just doing our budgeting today, actually, for those programs. And what's great about them is they offer a lot of very collaborative and not necessarily duplicative programs. But it has been made it possible for things like Stephen mentioned that we did a Olelo Hawaii version of Moana. So that required a contract with Disney, which I worked on. And then we actually worked with 5 of our campuses to produce it. We recorded it all at HCC's Melee program. Student engineers recorded 4,000 original files. But first, Puake Nogomeyer from Manoa program and his team translated 10,000 words, not just for meaning, but for lip flap, because we couldn't change the animation. And then Ali Carvalho came back and played the lead role, and Nicole Scherzinger played her mom. She only had a few lines and sang one song. But we cast 30 other roles locally, all Lelo Hawaii speakers, and recorded all of them. And we get it all done in, I think, the recording process was basically done over a couple weeks, but the whole thing took about a year and a half to put the whole thing together properly, and Disney was very pleased. Unfortunately, it's not available for sale because it was an educational license, but we were able to provide DVD copies to every school in Halau and immersion school. We probably gave away 1,500 copies of the movie to schools and to libraries for all the kids that are homeschooled and stuff, to encourage students to study Olelo Hawaii. And so, we're very proud of it. And if you watch it, you really can't tell that it shouldn't have been in Hawaiian in the first place. And I think it's actually a much better movie in Hawaiian. So we're very proud of those efforts. And I think hopefully there's more to come. That's a long process. I think Kamehameha Schools asked if we could do Dumbo next, but I don't think we're going to do that next. But I wasn't quite sure what the connection would be. In any case, we were very excited to work with Disney and work with other partners. We do internships with all the shows that come here, and we do work with industry. I really want to. One thing that's happening right now is we have a big shortage of crews because there's so many shows shooting at the same time. So working with the IATSE and the different unions to try to create a proper training program, because now we have a proper training facility for that. And the building also, under the BOR rules, is designed to be available for industry to utilize if it doesn't interfere with our educational efforts. But I think it's great to have professionals in the building. I don't know if you're familiar with this reboot of Doogie Howser with Jason Scott Lee is playing the father, and the doctor is now a young girl in this Hapa family. That was actually done at the Cancer Center. The Cancer Center had 2 completely unfinished floors, and they built a complete walkthrough. You won't believe it when you see the show. Complete walkthrough hospital, as well as her bedroom set and everything. And because of that, the university made several $100,000 in rent money over the last 6 months from being the location. And it shows beautifully, because the exteriors are all the cancer center and everything. And in the show, the girl is actually a graduate of the University of Hawaii. So I was really pleased that we were able to do all that. And I look forward to more integration with industry like that.
Well, thank you, Chris, for that, for all that very helpful information. One thing I will say, my background is not nearly as interesting as Chris's is. However, in one of my past lives, I worked for the Motion Picture Association of America as Director of Government Affairs for them. And then after that, Senior Director of Federal Government Affairs for the Entertainment Software Association, which is the trade association that represents the video game industry. And one thing that I learned during my time at MPAA is that the film industry is something that when people do shooting on location, it's not just the film industry that makes money. It is all the businesses that are surrounding that filming. One point, I took the time earlier today to look up how much on location filming actually brings into the local economy of whatever state they're doing the filming in. And on average, that brings in approximately $250,000 a day to whatever local economy on location programming is being filmed. And that's on average. Obviously, if the production is larger, like it's a big budget film, you're going to be talking about higher numbers than that. Having said that, that is one indicator that it's not like if the film industry that we are looking to help to develop here makes money, it's not like no one else makes money. This is one of those situations where everyone ends up winning. It's a win-win-win. Having said that, that's a good segue to one of the questions I'm looking at on the chat, which is, have there been any new companies that have emerged from this program? Any new entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I was saying that I just wrote back into the chat to Lorna that, actually there are several production companies that have been started by our students. And, I often get requests from companies asking, do you think our students want to intern and do our work for us for free? And I'm like, no, but, we have a jobs page, and, you're welcome to hire those companies and those students, if they, we do some things that are more integrated into curriculum. Sometimes we have some agreements where we have corporate sponsors, and the deliverables, like for instance, for the new Regal Theater out in Ko'olina, out in Kapolei, that's run by the McNaughton Group. The McNaughton Group actually underwrites those production classes, and the deliverable for the students is to create a trailer every year that runs before every movie that shows in that theater. And so far we've done 3, and they're all very different. They have to do a different theme every year, but they're all written, directed, edited, and they're gorgeous. They're all very different from one another. And that's an example of, I think, where we have a successful partnership with the industry.
Excellent. Well, let me ask you this. What do you see as the next steps towards helping develop this industry in our state? So
the Centers for Creative Production outside of Hollywood, this has also been one of my North Stars, is if you look at why Vancouver became a production facility, why New Zealand is a production hub. One is, quite frankly, the industry does run on incentives, and whenever after a network or a studio decides they're going to make something, then they have to figure out where's the cheapest place to make it. And while people may not have an appreciation for these tax incentives, the reality is they work. They've been very successful for us. And the track record of when they get curtailed or capped and stuff is the business goes elsewhere. And I know people think they're going to come here no matter what, but There's a very successful show on NBC. It's actually the #1 news show on NBC. It's about The Rock, and it's about The Rock growing up in Hawaii and going to McKinley High School, and they shoot it all in Australia. And they do that because Australia gave them a better deal than Hawaii was going to give them. And it's very unfortunate as far as I'm concerned. But I will say that, I will say to my friends in the legislature, if The Rock, the biggest star in the world, can't make the economics work, then that tells you they're not just going to come here just because they want to or they like coming here. So incentives are a big part of this. The other side of all this is the creative talent. And the schools was designed to develop our human infrastructure, our human capital. So if you look at where, for instance, outside of Hollywood, you went to Austin, Texas. There's a filmmaker named Richard Linklater. There's another one named Robert Rodriguez. They do movies like Boy, and Robert Rodriguez does a lot of action pictures. And they all decided that if you wanted to work with them, you had to shoot in Austin, in Texas. Same thing for New Zealand. New Zealand is the birthplace of Peter Jackson, who did the Lord of the Rings films, and now is convinced James Cameron to shoot all his Avatar movies down there. It's also the home of Taika Waititi, who does the Thor movies and does What We Do in the Shadows and JoJo, the movie he had last year. He's one of the most sought after directors, and he is half Maori. And both of them share something that we share, that they were both mentored by a woman named Murata Mita, who was one of my very first hires. She's really the godmother of the New Zealand film industry, and she really gave birth to our Hawaiian filmmakers here. So many of them reference her. So unfortunately, she passed away a few years ago, but she really was someone who was responsible for mentoring so many filmmakers. So you have to have both. Now you also have to have physical infrastructure. And when you talk about what's the next step is really building an actual studio complex. The most successful state for shooting now, it's not really California, it's Georgia. Georgia has had a larger tax incentive than we have, up to 30%. And they've been very consistent with it. And that's where all of the Marvel movie comes from. All the movie, that's where like much of production comes from. So they actually have 5 studio complexes. The largest is 700 acres. And we need to get at least one going, because when big shows come here, like a Jumanji or Jurassic Park or Pirates of the Caribbean, they really only can shoot our location. They can only do our backdrops, our beaches, and our jungles. They can't do the interiors, and the interiors is where like all the visual effects magic happens. And so we're really missing out on a huge portion of the business. And when you think about the tertiary industries, like you were just mentioning about sort of the multiplier effect of what grows up around an actual studio complex, it's quite considerable. And it's really the next level of this. And I'm hopeful that we're able to, as I mentioned, do something with private equity.
Do you have any other do you have any other thoughts to add, Chris?
No, I just, I appreciate having the forum. I think from the very beginning, when as I mentioned, when I was showing up, when Candy was very kind and let me show her films to audiences 20 years ago, it's been a very consistent story. I think what's happened is things have kind of caught up with that. And I will say that, before we passed our current incentives, which we called Act 88, which was in 2006, we never had more than $100 million in direct spend, in production spend. And since then, as I said, we climbed to almost 500 million in 2018. 2019, it started to drop a little bit, in part because we actually capped our incentives. 2020 became an anomaly because of what happened with COVID, of course. But I think it's come, roaring back. But, I'm always talking with our friends in the ledge about, please don't curtail this. And please don't think that, incentives are something that, you can just do for a little while and then it just keeps going. Because the reality is Louisiana did this, and everybody went next door to Georgia. New Mexico did this, and the industry just collapsed. So You know, there's always other places that people can shoot besides us. And we need the work because these are union living wage jobs. And as I said, when you think about what else we're going to do, I mean, I love the tech business, but we're not Silicon Valley, unfortunately, you know. And you think about, I remember a while ago, someone was talking about a Korean car manufacturer was going to come here. As I said, I don't think anything that requires raw goods to be shipped in and hard goods to be shipped out is ever in the cards for us. And if you just look at what we don't compete for, as I mentioned, whether it's, you know, Boeing or BMW or Harley motorcycles or any of that, we're just not in that game. And that's a result of our geographic isolation. Now, our geographic isolation also means that we, in the pivot to Asia, we're in the center of everything. So that is a very positive thing for us. And one of the things that someone mentioned, the esports tournament that Manoa has been hosting with Overwatch. The reason they chose Hawaii is because Overwatch is just as popular in Asia as it is in the West. And we are in a better place for them to host that tournament. So that's what we really have to build on, is everything that's happening. Oh, there it is. Thank you for that. Everything that's happening in the pivot to Asia. So, you know, it's always what Hawaii has always had that connection to Asia, right? You know, many of our families came originally for economic opportunity, initially to work in the fields and then see what lives they could build. And I think for a long time, and you know, it's true to a certain extent, people didn't think about Hawaii in terms of economic opportunity. It's been a couple generations since, you know, since sugar and pineapple. And I think, you know, my own philosophy about all of this is when you talk about, as I said, I look at brain drain and what I see is investment. And if you think back 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, all the students who went from places like India and China and the rest of the world and went to study in the continental, you know, United States at schools, and then they went back to their home countries and they applied what they learned within the context of their own communities. You know, one of the things I've noticed since I came home and started working on this is that we kind of have a habit of hiring people that are not from the islands, and we pay them a lot of money, and they get very frustrated with us, and we get very frustrated with them, and then we pay them even more money to go away. And you know, we at this point, what we need to do is embrace and harvest was kind of marketed a little shakily, but it's really about come on and come home, because we are now several generations past the plantations, several generations of exporting our students, which is basically that's our biggest economic export, is our kids. And what we have to do is find a way to bring them back. And COVID opened up an enormous opportunity. My own niece, who also went to Ilani, graduated from ACM at Manoa, then went to work in Hollywood for a big director, and then was hired away to work for a big tech company, and now she's at Google. You know, she was allowed to come back, and she could have stayed for 2 years if she wanted to. And, you know, so the idea of working remotely, COVID opened up a lot of opportunities for us. And I hope that we continue to take advantage of them, because we have so many Akamai kids who have learned so much on the mainland. And you know what? I think the best analogy I can give you is look at our food scene. Look at all these chefs like Chris Kajioka and all, you know, Sheldon and stuff that all went and worked at these fancy restaurants on the mainland. And then they came back and they applied what they learned using local ingredients and raised the game for everybody. And so I think they're the most prominent, obvious thing, because quite frankly, being a food destination is a huge positive for us. And this again goes with my own economic theory of aligning with what I will always be our dominant industry. And I absolutely believe it. We have to figure out a way to attenuate it, but tourism is always going to be how we're perceived in the world. The problem when you talk to people on the mainland, and I used to have this conversation with like Jerry Yang, who's the founder of Yahoo, who's a friend of mine when I was on the mainland. And I would say, because he had like a crazy house on the Big Island, just like Michael Dell and stuff. I would say, I really want you to open an office in Hawaii. And he'd go, but nobody works in Hawaii. And I'd say, no, everybody in Hawaii has 2 to 3 jobs just to get by. It's just that they also know how to have a good time. You think of it as a place to go on vacation, but because we have so cemented this perception of Hawaii as where you go for a vacation and to have fun and not to work in the zeitgeist, it's very hard to disassociate that. You know, I don't ever see us running ads on CNN like I do for Virginia or Rhode Island or New York from the business community. Do you know what I mean? About like set up your business here. We don't do that here, right? And if you remember in the dot-com bust, the number one sign that your company was about to collapse was that when you opened your Maui office. Now it's not that far-fetched to say you could have these outposts here, but it's because of how we have this connectivity now, because nobody had Zoom before and everything like that, and companies suddenly discovered they didn't have to spend all this money on physical real estate to get productivity out of their employees. So, you know, I think we have a lot of opportunities to exploit that. Whether or not we're going to, I'm not sure, but I am encouraged, like I said, when I see initiatives like Movers and Chakas, as much as, you know, people kind of laughed at it and everything, because they really recognized how many of our kids have gone away and how many really want to come back. I always tell my friends, there is no better place to raise your kids. And, you know, I've actually have a number of my friends from Hollywood who have literally moved here and have set up their operations out of Hawaii, which was not something they ever thought of before. And, you know, COVID accelerated that, and we just have to take advantage of it.
Chris, I think we probably have maybe half a minute left, but Steve has asked a very important question that we really ought to address. He's asking, who are the legislators who supported us, who supported this program, so that they can be thanked? And, you know, we start off with Senator Kidani. She has been really just a staunch supporter, but Senator De La Cruz has also, even President of the Senate, and former Senator Carol Fukunaga, current council member, and many others, but Chris can add to that list. So, yes, please thank them.
No, Carol, when she was a senator, David Ige, when he was a senator, the two of them, all of our initial funding really was driven by them. And that mantle has very much been taken up by Senator Kidani, Senator Kim, Senator De La Cruz. And I think especially since we've been able to build, you know, the West Oahu campus didn't become a reality until 2012, I think, right? So there wasn't the opportunity to even think about having this kind of facility. It's a much longer story that we were going to do this at Manoa, but that's another story. But yes, so thank you to all of the above. But it was really been very bipartisan, you know, so. And
Ty Cullen absolutely has been so supportive.
Ty and Sylvia, they've been fantastic, you know, great supporters. And so, you know, and I can't think of anybody who's been like not supportive of what we've been doing, but I will say, I want to say particular thank you to the folks who look out for the West Side, because they, you know, were the main constituency that funded this building. And gave us our first planning grant, and then gave us the money to build it. And I didn't mention it, but we had a $2 million planning grant, and then the cost of the building was $34,480 or something like that. So a little less than $35 million. So about $37 million. And as I said, it rivals anything you can find in the mainland.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ken, Chris, and Doris. It was such an educational program over here. It opened up our eyes to new outlooks for our children. And I want to thank you guys all personally, and Region 5 would like to thank you personally too. So thank you very much. Great job.